Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, August 19, 2025. Time in Texas, about 3 p.m. I have a subscribe button in the lower right corner of my screen. Thanks for like, subscribe, and share. And for hitting the like button, that helps my channel to grow. Some of the things we'll cover. What's going on with that Erin hurricane and its impact on the East Coast. President Trump to send the U.S. military to Venezuela, plus. So let's get started. So we have Dabu 77 reporting so we have Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and we have some mandatory evacuations for their outer lying islands. With regard to the Hurricane Erin this afternoon. So North Carolina is expecting waves, a storm surge of 3 to 5 feet, but waves of 20 to 30 feet. I had mentioned earlier that even though Erin passed 200 miles from Puerto Rico, it knocked out the power to about 200,000 people. This is a very strong storm. So North Carolina has put in place some mandatory evacuations for its outer lying islands and also issued warnings to some of its cities along the coast. And we have also from Dabu 77, it's going to affect in North Carolina, Highway 12. And it's expected that Erin will produce coastline effects all the way up to New Jersey. So that's going on. We have from BPEARTHWATCH that Erin is a Cat 2 expected to increase to a Cat 3 wind speed. Waves are predicted 20 to 24 feet. Along North Carolina, also impacting all the way up to Virginia and New Jersey. So that's going on. And areas impacted include Myrtle Beach, Wilmington, Charleston, South Carolina, all the way up to Virginia. So the 2 p.m. update for Erin gives us a wind speed of about 105, and it's moving forward at about 10 miles per hour. Barometric has dropped dramatically to 958. So that's going on. Now, on the other side of Erin, we have another area with the 2 p.m. update. This one is 10% development in the next 48 hours, 60% in the next 7 days. It's moving west-northwest at 20 miles per hour. Now, Erin is expected to turn away from the U.S. This second area is also expected to turn away. We have a third area that has is 30% chance development in 48 hours, 30% in 7 days. And it's also moving west at 15 miles per hour. So it's also expected to turn away from the U.S. Nevertheless, along the East Coast, Erin will impact the public. So it's good to know what is going on. And we have this. Also from space weather, in the last 24 hours, we have had an M-class 1.1 that lasted for 4 hours. The space weather, NOAA, reports no significant CME from it. And the KP index is at a 4 level, which means we might see auroras in the top 1/3 of the U.S. And we have this. President Trump makes a public statement. He wants to see the hostages released in Gaza. And he believes in order for that to happen, that Hamas must be confronted and destroyed. As I put out in my last video, I believe that the U.S. military is setting up for a big operation in the Middle East, and that I personally believe when this happens, that will involve Iran, Iraq, Syria. I believe that when this happens and after President Trump has relocated the people from Gaza, I personally believe that something catastrophic will occur in Israel. So President Trump is putting out some information about that. In Texas, in El Paso, the U.S. federal government has built the largest detention center for illegals in the United States, and that's in El Paso. And we have this. I put out information in my previous video about what President Trump is doing in Washington, D.C. He's also taking another step. Citizens who live in Washington, D.C. were having their concealed carry permits held up in bureaucracy for months. President Trump has stepped in, and that processing of concealed carry permits for American citizens in Washington, D.C. has been cut from months to days. It's amazing what an effective president can do. And we have information coming out. My source on this is KATHLEEN ESCALERA, that part of the Epstein information we'll see coming out will also include the real story, which was that the Gates Foundation, the CIA, MI6, Mossad, plus the Deep State were using Epstein Island as a honeypot operation to blackmail people and engaging in underage sex and sex trafficking and so on. That is being put forth now. That was simply the cover story. The real story was that all these thousands of kidnapped children processed on Epstein plus surrounding islands, privately owned islands. Their DNA was being taken and they were being cloned in the CIA, MI6, Mossad operated bio labs, also operated by a division of the U.S. Department of Defense, DARPA, to make thousands of clones. And they actually have bio labs with chambers, like a water-filled tube holding a human form. We've seen that in the movie Matrix. So that's going on. So Gates cloned thousands of babies on Epstein Island plus, and it was a deep state genetic slaughterhouse, and their cover was the sex trafficking, and the genetic labs were operated with money funneled through the CIA, MI6, and Mossad, and big tech. And we have this, that Gates and DARPA, yes, and the Rothschilds were using government satellites to track, and submarines to track any ships or whatever in that area. They were using an exotic energy power system for the biolabs, and they named it Project Genesis at a meeting at the Bohemian Grove, located in California, in 2003. And it involved Gates, Epstein, and Bilderberg members. Their goal was to replace humans. And they took the DNA from the tens of thousands of kidnapped children since 2003. The clone labs were operated, so they would use the DNA from the kidnapped children, go into a lab and whip up an embryo, and then produce a clone baby that would be taken care of by AI robots. And these clone babies then would have implants that would directly connect them to Microsoft servers. Big tech was definitely involved in this. And their cover, the big tech cover story, was they were doing quantum research. And these clone babies then had implants, and that would carry a digital ID inside their bodies. And we have this. Some of the clones were defective, and they would be used in the ritual ceremonies on Epstein and surrounding islands to blackmail politicians, actors, billionaires. The Epstein suicide was not a suicide of Epstein, and the body that was seen was a clone of Epstein. President Trump had known about this operation since its beginning in 2003, and that's why he was never on the Lolita Express. And we have, in July of 2025, last month, Marines raided private islands where the Epstein Island is located, which is like in the Virgin Islands off of the coast of Florida area. And they found 3,000 cryo units. Cryo is like a freezer. 3,000 human embryos. And they also found the child DNA records that were tagged with the Gates Foundation barcodes. And they found in deep caves on these islands the bio chambers, something like we saw in the movie Matrix. And President Trump holds the torch to light all this information on fire. Now, we have this. Also, the Gates Foundation has been putting microchips into global food supplies, primarily bread, pasta, and cereals. And I wondered why. This is about 2 years ago. God placed me on a fast from anything that contained yeast. I submit it might be tied to this information coming out now. So I've just covered that the clones were being made on the Epstein Island plus other surrounding islands. They put implants into the clones. And now the Gates Foundation has also infiltrated global food supply to put microchips in food, primarily bread, pasta, cereals. And independent labs are finding these microchips in the food supply on all continents, multiple continents. And the idea was to put the microchips into the food supply, people consume them, then have the individuals use a wearable, a bracelet, just like we heard coming out of the mouth of RFK Jr. 4 months ago, that he was hopeful in the next 4 years that every American citizen would be wearing a wearable bracelet. The objective, according to this new information coming out, is the Gates put the microchips in the food supply, then requires citizens to wear the wearable bracelet to track the individual, and the information would transmit from inside the individual's body. So, correlating that with this information coming out about the clones and their implants, it would be easy for the deep state then to distinguish between who is human and who is not human. And these clones are among us. Many child actors and actresses have been clones, and we are seeing these clones publicly on the mainstream media, in movies, as politicians, and so on. So, yeah, it's good to know what is going on and to pray to God for discernment. I know I recently heard a friend of mine, 2 friends, they were both widows, and they had gone online to Christian dating sites, and one of them said, you know, you have to be careful even when you meet someone through one of these Christian dating sites to know whether they're a real Christian or not. Well, I submit this. You also have to be very discerning to know whether the individual is actually human. So that's going on. From New York Prepper. All right. Now, in my last video I put out, I believe President Trump is setting up this big operation in the Middle East, and that when that occurs, something catastrophic, I believe, will happen in Israel, and that it would be concurrent with the U.S. military hitting cartels, especially Venezuela. Now we have additional information on that from New York Prepper. President Trump is deploying 3 destroyers in the Caribbean, 3 destroyers. Now, I reported some months ago that we actually have in the Gulf of America 4 destroyers. So President Trump is now putting 3 destroyers near Venezuela, plus 4,000 Marines. Way to go, President Trump. And I brought out in that previous video that Maduro, Venezuela, was heavily involved in the U.S. 2020 coup. So that's going on. And we have this. Yeah, President Trump with regard to Washington, D.C., and I believe this action that President Trump has taken in D.C. also correlates to these upcoming extreme U.S. military operations. So he's going to increase the number of National Guard in D.C., double it, and from Mississippi, 200 will be coming, from Ohio, 150, South Carolina, 200, West Virginia, 400. Yeah, and he's adding that they will be armed. So that also goes along with him cutting the time for citizens to receive their concealed carry permits. It's an exciting time to be alive. I think it's good to pray for America, President Trump, the U.S. military, and world peace. I love you, and I'll see you soon.